Okay, calm down.
You are the chairman of the Uhuru Movement, which is U.S. based, but it's internationalist, it's Pan-Africanist, it's socialist. It was founded in 1972, and it's led by the African People's Socialist Party, and you were the chairman of that party. And tell us what was done to you, what you were charged with, and then what you were ultimately convicted of.
We were attacked, our homes and offices in 7 different houses, homes, and offices of our movement in 2 states, in St. Louis, Missouri, and St. Petersburg, Florida. I was in St. Louis, Missouri when the attack happened. My wife and I, it was the pre-dawn attack that they made against us. My wife and I were up because she presides over a doula program here in St. Louis, and I was preparing to go to the gym. And so we were sitting around talking. At 5 o'clock in the morning, this noise comes from this loudspeaker saying, "Come out with your hands up and your hands empty." And after they say this, that explosions start going off throughout the neighborhood and even in the backyard, in the back entry of our home, stairwell, and what have you. And they said, "This is the FBI, come out." And so we were startled. And when I went outside, I was greeted by these armed military forces with automatic weapons mounted with these laser targeting devices that were pointed at me, red dots bouncing off my chest. And then I get downstairs. I've asked my wife to call and let people know that we're under attack. She couldn't do that because they had jammed our phones. And so they zip tie me behind my back. My wife, and she gets downstairs, they handcuff her behind her back. They take our phones. They go into our houses, explosions still going off around the place. They've broken windows and things like that. They've done a similar thing on the south side of St. Petersburg, of St. Louis, where the majority of the white people live, where I'm right now, where we're having this discussion. And we have a solidarity center. They broke the doors down. They used automatic battering rams. They broke windows. They stole files and electronic devices. In St. Petersburg, Florida, they did the same thing to the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida. They knocked down every door in the building. They went and shut down temporarily our radio station that was there. They raided our spaces and files and things like that. They took financial documents, the equivalent of they took something like 13 terabytes of materials. They said it's the equivalent of 2.5 billion books that they took from us at that time. And so I'm arguing with them, finding out why is it that you're doing this, and they're saying that later to this morning, and this is going to be big news. This FBI guy tells me that we're going to be there's going to be an indictment of a Russian national who's in Russia, and your name is in the indictment. So they said we're serving a search warrant. And I'm saying, where's the search warrant? And they couldn't show it to me because they didn't have it with them. The people who were dealing with us, they occupied our spaces for 6, 7, 8 hours, taking materials out of the place. And so they didn't charge us with anything. They finally said we could leave if we wanted to, and we left. And then 9 months later, they indicted us for being Russian agents working under the direction and control of Russia and conspiring to work under the direction and control of Russia. And so in September of this year, we finally went to trial. And after the indictment, they took our passports. I have to report every week to somebody. They can come to my home when they want to. I have to get permission to travel. And some irony here, if you will, because you talk about this thing about racism, because it's an African guy, it's a Black guy that I have to report to, because racism, the work that I did in the 1960s got him a job, but his job is inside the colonial system, and he participates as an instrument of that system. So anyway, we went to trial, and they said trial was going to last for 4 weeks. It lasted 9 days. There were no the state had no people they could to testify against us. They put a $10 million bounty on anybody who could bring information that could support their case. They got nothing. There was nobody from our movement that they talked. There were no even ex-people from the movement, people who don't like us anymore. They couldn't get anybody to come testify. They had 14 witnesses. 12 of them were FBI agents. 2 of them were so-called experts, Russian experts and what have you. And all of them had to say that they knew nothing about us doing the stuff that government said we're doing. They had to say government had charged us with somehow be participating in Russian election interference because we ran 2 people for office in St. Petersburg, Florida in 2017, 2019 on reparations against gentrification. And they had to say there was no evidence of any kind of Russian interference or anything like that in the case. So it was a hard hit. And so, we spent more than $500,000 on lawyers up to now. And we're still raising money for lawyers because we're going to appeal the outcome because we're going to Tampa, Florida, and we're calling on people who can be there in Tampa, Florida on December 16th. That's where the sentence is going to happen. If you can get to St. Petersburg, Florida, December 15th, which is right across the bridge from Tampa, Florida, having a rally that's really important because we have to show everybody that we recognize, the state needs to recognize that, the people recognize that this is an attack against Black people, against the struggles of Black people, the work, the institutions that we've created, more than a 50-some odd economic institution, independent economic institutions. That's part of the reason that they attacked us.
One of, I think, the most offensive claims in the case against you is that you were kind of a pawn of the Russians. They suggest that your ideology isn't an ideology that you have. For instance, your opposition to the proxy war in Ukraine, it's not because you have a very strong record of criticizing NATO, criticizing interventionism, criticizing Western interventionism. It's because you're some Russian controlled dupe. So can you
Right.
speak to that? I mean, how long have you had these ideas that you have that they are accusing you of doing at the behest of sharing at the behest of Russia?
I think it's important that you mentioned Sami al-Arian and his daughter, because we organized the largest anti-war mobilization after the 9/11 that happened in the Southeast. We had mobilization at MacDill Air Force Base, where much of this effort was headquartered. Our history has been one of opposition to these horrible wars. We were against Vietnam. We were against the attacks that were made on Cuba. I was in Nicaragua shortly after independence. That was there. So historically we have been opposed to this, and they know it. And the fact is, they got all the documentation that shows it. And one of our lawyers asked the lead FBI agent, is being opposed to the war un-American? Said no. Was that like some offense? No. Is working to expose genocide against Black people, which they said the Russians inspired as well? No. And so this is the kind of thing that happened. So that's why it was impossible for them to convict us for being under the direction and control of Russia, a foreign government. But what they did was they convicted us of being conspiring to do something that never happened, to conspiring to be under the direction and control of the Russian government. And which is extraordinary because that's a thought crime. It's mean that it didn't have to do anything. I had to have thought that based on their interpretation of whatever it was that I said, or etc. So that was, it's a bogus charge. We've always been opposed to those wars. We've always demonstrated against those wars. We've always supported the Palestinian struggle. We've always supported the people in Iran. We organized one of the first mobilization in Gainesville, Florida, when the Iranian Revolution first kicked off, and the Iranian students took that nest of spies called an embassy, American embassy in Tehran, and in this country, people were beating up people, attacking people who they thought were Iranians, or they couldn't know that Iranians were not Arabs. So if they were Arabs, they were attacked. And then in this prestigious University of Florida campus in Gainesville, Florida, they were having nighttime rallies, Sand Niggers Go Home. They were doing stuff like send the Klan to Iran. This is a prestigious school there, and so we organized mobilization protests against that. We organized the Black community. We marched against that, and the first march was attacked. I mean, by mobs of white people. They attacked that. So the second one, we succeeded in making making it happen, and the attackers, the hundreds of white people chanting America, waving American flags, attacked us. And so the point that I would make is that we've always been opposed to those wars, because the United States is incapable, has never participated in a just war, can't participate in a just war, and we recognize that. And we've said it all along, and that's part of the problem that the U.S. government has with us. And of course, the bigger problem is that we are an organization that's based on self-determination, anti-colonialism, African people being self-governing people, being in charge of our own affairs. And this is something that hasn't happened since the 1960s. And when we had people like the guy who was Attorney General Mitchell, John Mitchell at that time, declare that by the end of 1969, the Black Panther Party would be destroyed. This is a time when J. Edgar Hoover headed the Federal Bureau of Investigation, said that the Black Panther Party was the greatest threat to the internal security of this country since the Civil War. This was 1969 when they attacked, they killed Fred Hampton at his in his home. They attacked the Black Panther Party the next week in Los Angeles, and firefight went on there. This is the stuff that we've dealt with and had to deal with as Black people struggling against our oppression and exploitation here in this country. So no, we didn't just come up in opposition to these things. We didn't just start doing the stuff. They said that the Russians are responsible for the stance that we take on reparations. But the fact is that I organized the first movement, International Tribunal on reparations for Black people that happened in this country. The first quantification of value stolen from African people on labor alone, I organized that. And it was based on international law. It was
And
based,
when was that?
that was in 1983, 82.
Well, maybe Putin did time travel to convince you to do that.
That's what somebody said. Yeah.
Yeah, there's obviously a long history of people, the FBI and the U.S. government accusing Black radicals of being pawns. And you even have people like Kamala Harris making that point. She said that the knee protest that Colin Kaepernick did was probably Russian bots.
Yeah.
What is her name? Karen. She was Secretary of State, not Karen. Black Secretary of State Rice, Karen
Yeah. Yeah.
Rice, who
Yeah.
said it was outside agitators at the George Floyd.
Condoleezza Rice.
No, not
Yes.
Susan Rice. Susan Rice.
Susan Rice.
But
Yes.
they both
Yes.
said it. I think honestly, they both
Yes.
said it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I just wanted to ask you what your thoughts are, given that you were being treated this way under Biden. What are your thoughts on the difference between Trump and Biden, on whether or not you think either of them are fascists?
Well, colonialism is colonialism is colonialism. And that the fascist issue that I hear raised consistently now is something that becomes convenient when it looks like the colonial contradiction is seeping into the general population. But nobody was talking about fascism when they killed George Floyd, when they were murdering Black people throughout this country. Nobody says it's fascism because you have this huge African prison population, something like 1 out of every 3 African men between the ages of 18 and 35 going to prison. It's not fascism. It's when it appears to threaten the rights of white people that fascism gets raised. And some Black people raise that too, but they raise it because the colonial question is the critical question. And so you can have a right-wing colonizer and a left-wing colonizer, but we're still colonizing. If you look at France, this supposedly leader, vanguard of the struggle against fascism during the Second World Imperialist War. And at the same time, it was fighting Nazis in France. It had colonies in Algeria, all over Africa, and Vietnam, and et cetera, et cetera. So the question is colonialism. It's a colonial mode of production that is a parasitic relationship that encapsulates the entire world, and that's what we are dealing with. So I'm not going to go that way because what they're asking me to do is to be pro-democratic party. I'm against fascism because Trump is a fascist, and it's Biden who sent these guys. It's Biden who put 100,000 cops in the streets of this country using Clinton. It's Biden who is the one who puts forth the anti-crime bill. It's Biden who, when he was in the Senate, was opposed to the Civil Rights Bill. It was Biden who was opposed to busing even because he didn't want his children to go to school in the jungle. So I'm supposed to see Trump as this proto-fascist, and therefore turn my attention and support Biden and Kamala Harris as opposed to being for Trump. I'm for Black people. I'm not looking for a new colonizer, whether it's an American colonizer or Russian colonizer, except the whole notion of self-determination argues against this thing they're talking about, working and being under the direction and control of Russians or anybody else. In fact, they know we're not under the control and direction of Russians. Their problem is that we won't be under the control and direction of them.
Of course, anyone who can make it, I really suggest that they go to your event on December 16th.
I hope that people can be there. It's the state's event, where again, we're going to be sentenced. The objective of the state is to give me 5 years and Penny 5 years and Jesse 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine.
And I'm sorry, how old? Do you mind if I ask you how old you are?
I'm 83 years old. In October, I was 83 years old.
So they want to lock you up.
It's a lifetime
88.
sentence. Yeah, it's a lifetime sentence. That's what they intend to do to give me. But I think it's really important that the question of free speech is obviously an issue here, and that everybody should be able to fight for that. But I think it's really important that the people, that we let the state know that we know that this is an attack also on Black self-determination, on the Black community, on Black people. We've created institutions, economic development programs, projects that no government in this country has ever done. Not here where we are in St. Louis, not in St. Petersburg, Florida, not the federal government, and they would attack us for destroying food deserts by bringing food and the ability of people to have economic capacity there. So I hope that people will go to Hands Off Uhuru, that's UHURU.org, and come to St. Petersburg, Florida on December 15th, if you can. But certainly come to Tampa, Florida on December 16th, where the sentence is going to happen at the federal courthouse there. And I thank you very much, Katie, for sharing this and your audience with me and us at this time.